I'm Jessica Genauer, a lecturer in international relations at Flinders University in Australia, and I'm joined today by Maksym Yali, Professor of International Relations at the National Aviation University in Kyiv. Thanks for joining us today, Maxim. Maxim, we've been hearing reports that people are being forcibly deported from Ukraine into Russian territory. And I was wondering whether you could tell us a little more about this. What do we know about the scope of this operation? Do we know how many people are being deported? Do we know where they're being taken from and where they're being taken to?
Well, actually, we can't know for sure official numbers because, for example, there is Russian statistics, but it falls because they were given statistics of deportation from Mariupol for many weeks already, and they call the number more than 100,000 of people only from Mariupol. But due to Ukrainian authorities, yes, the figure is about already exceeds 100,000 of people. I guess it's even more, 150. But as I mentioned, nobody say for sure. It's true, and it's also very disgusting and awful thing because many people, as it was said and mentioned by local authorities from Mariupol as well, who know the situation is better, that these people, just FSB, special services of Russia, take off their passports, documents, and just give a piece of paper written something that they cannot leave the places where they are deported for 2 years. So, and a lot of people are deported to Siberia, to the Far East, to depressed regions of Russia, unpopulated. So just like in Stalin's time, you know, there were a lot of deportations from Mariupol as well, by the way, in 1944, as well as from Crimea. Crimea Tatars and Greeks were deported there, Chechens. So there are a lot of such cases during Soviet period of time. So now the tactics and the policy of Kremlin is the same in the 21st century. So some people who managed to flee, also with the help of Russians, I know such people, especially from the east side of Mariupol. They had no choice actually, and some of them wish to leave Mariupol because it's impossible to live there, constant bombarding, shelling, etc. So I can understand these people. Some people do it voluntarily, and we also take into account because they were poisoned, I mean, their brains by Russian propaganda, and unfortunately there are special psychological and informational operations are taking place in Mariupol as well. And unfortunately, some people who cannot, who do not have access to any information from Ukraine because it's blocked, completely blocked, they are in informational isolation for almost 50 days already. So they believe in it, unfortunately, and we should also understand it. But it's a minority. Most of people who managed to flee by themselves or with the help of Russian occupiers somehow manage to evacuate from it, firstly to Georgia, as I know such examples, then by airplanes to Ukraine. But if they need money, if they managed to escape filtration camps, as you know, there are plenty of them around Mariupol as well. And those people who support Ukraine, are imprisoned. For example, my coach of boxing was also captured by Russian occupiers. I know when he was trying to flee from Mariupol. And there are a lot of such facts. Besides, for example, now I'm trying to help somehow to free drivers, volunteers who are doing their best, risking their lives to evacuate people from Mariupol. And there are a lot of cases of such cases. Just yesterday, I was talking with one of volunteers who are doing it. So they said that more than 10 drivers already captured already and imprisoned, and nobody knows anything about them. So they block evacuation from these occupied territories, not only from Mariupol, but Mariupol is the biggest city they encircled and besieged. And so, and there are a lot of such cases, and they block evacuation to the territory controlled by Ukraine, and as well they also deport not only to Russia but to so-called DNR and LNR. Particularly from Mariupol, I know a lot of such cases because a lot of people write to me, ask somehow to help to find people, because you know, situation with me is still hundreds of thousands of people are in such an awful situation. So it's true, and unfortunately there is no still reaction of the West. They usually need to check the information, but it's impossible to check because these people, you know, for example, when they get to filtration camps, special services, occupants take their not only their documents, but as well cell phones, for them not to be able to call people, to tell the truth and to inform their relatives, and as well they delete all the videos, photos of the crimes of Russians in occupied territories, particularly in Mariupol. I know it pretty well. When my mother and sister were on their way from occupied territories, they searched on checkpoints their cell phones as well. Luckily, I told them to delete all the information and contacts, particularly with me, because I'm enlisted among the person to be arrested and to killed. I know it for sure.
Wow. Yep. And do you, in your evaluation, do you hold out hope that those people who have been taken into Russian territory could at some point be returned to Ukraine?
Of course, but you know, if they're in Siberia, you should understand that these people have nothing with them. So when they flee, so they have no, some of them don't even have documents. If they had, Russians took it, and they have no clothes, they have no money, they have nothing. So it's impossible. Besides, they are under control, as I mentioned, by local police and special services. So they prevent their evacuation. Those who were deported, as I mentioned, to the Far East, to Siberia, there are plenty of such cases. Those who managed to flee and are not controlled or managed to escape and flee from that filtration camps, trying to do so, and some of them succeed. So it's a matter of time, and of course it depends a lot on the pressure of the West, of the Western governments, because it's a violation of their rights. It's obvious, and they are considered just like prisoners. And it's true. And as you know, for example, well, I can give some parallels. Those who were taken into prison in so-called DNR in Donetsk, many civilians, they couldn't escape from it, from the prison for many years, and even Ukraine was trying to rescue them, to exchange for militaries and spies who committed crimes in Ukraine, and there were few of such successful exchanges, and still before the 24th of February, there were hundreds of such people who were still imprisoned in Russia and occupied territories.
Mm-hmm. Now, moving on to a question regarding the battlefront, can you comment on what we can expect from the battle as fighting intensifies over the coming days in the east and southeast of Ukraine?
Well, from my point of view, it will be a decisive battle, because, as you know, Putin and the Minister of Defense of Russia, Shoigu, already several weeks ago, having realized that they failed to capture the capital of Kyiv, of Ukraine, Kyiv, they fled. That Russian troops from Kyiv, Chernihiv regions, they declared that the main goal now of the war is to occupy Donetsk and Lugansk regions completely. So to come to administrative borders. So that's the main goal. And of course, not only this, but also to safeguard the positions on the south of Ukraine, to have that corridor to Crimea. As you know, it's very important for them, and they managed to occupy territories close to the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. So they will try to do it as well, and there were some just recent, yesterday, declarations of some Russian politicians to restore so-called Russian gubernia. It's a name of region, used to be in Russian Empire before it collapsed. So that territory is close to Crimea on the south of Ukraine, to be reunited with Crimea, and it to be recalled as Таврическая губерния. It's in Russian, it sounds like that. It's the name of the region, used to be during Russian Empire. So they understood that they failed to organize new so-called people republics in newly occupied regions. In Kherson, they were going to do the same as Donetsk People Republic, so-called, to organize the same in Kherson. But people don't want, they oppose it, they go for demonstration, no matter that Russians start shooting and just trying to prevent it anyway. They understand that people do not support occupation. They do not want to be in Russia, to join Russia, not talking about so-called republic, where the level of living is much worse than in controlled by Ukraine territories. And Mariupol, by the way, was an example. It's just 120 kilometers from Donetsk to the north, to the south, and was the biggest and still the biggest city controlled by Ukraine. And there were many reforms, changes, new projects supported by the West, and the city was flourishing, and people who are living in Donetsk, who have relatives there, who were coming there during that 8 years since 2014, could see the difference between the new so-called Russian Republic, Donetsk, and the capital of which, because it's still the biggest city, more than about 1 million people. And still, of course, as you know, in capital life is much better than in villages, in small towns. I'm not talking about, it was absolutely unbearable. But still, even in the biggest city, in so-called capital, the level of living, prices, salaries were much less than in Mariupol. So that's why one of the reasons they want to destroy it and have already destroyed it, erased it from the face of earth, and keep committing crimes. So it's a revenge, and of Putin and of occupied authorities as well. They knew it, and that's also the reason. So I guess the battlefield, so I mean the battle, will be very furious and much more intensive than even now. And I'm reading an analysis of, as I mentioned, of many experts from Ukraine, outside Ukraine, intelligence reports. So I still, and I'm sure Ukraine have enough forces just to defeat Russians, because first of all, that territories have very good defense, and already, except Mariupol, which they encircled from all sides, there are no serious victories, successes in any other points. So they didn't change the borders of defense near Donetsk, particularly near Lugansk. So there are furious battles, but still without success. Even Russian propagandists, some of them, which of course not on TV, but still writing in Telegram channels. Stelkov, as you know, the one who started this war, who came to Slavyansk. By the way, it was anniversary just yesterday of the beginning of the war. I mean, just this phase after Crimea. In Crimea, of course, it's began, but without any military actions. But in Slavyansk, it was the beginning of that phase of real war. So he also writes, I'm reading him, just he says, we have no success, and we have no any chances to conquer, because there are not of enough forces. So they try to mobilize new people to army from reserves who used to serve in army before. But a lot of people in Russia, soldiers who already received true information, they understand that the risk to be killed in Donbass is much higher than to get richer. Yes, to rob people, as they do, as you saw it in Bucha, in Kyiv region. So now they are selling it in Belarus, etc., etc. It's another interesting topic. So they need, without mobilization, I mean total mobilization, they have no chances to win, and everybody accepts it. But there are other risks. As you know, they already used chemical weapons in Mariupol. We discussed with you it yesterday. And due to intelligence service of Ukraine, I've read it today, they are ready and going to use nuclear weapon, tactical. So the risks are getting higher. So if they lose, they may use it, and they prepare already provocations in Russian territory on nuclear objects. in Belgorod. It's a region next to Ukraine, near Kharkiv, 60 kilometers away. So these risks are raising higher, much higher. So because, as you know, Putin wants to celebrate the victory, so-called victory. Of course, he can't reach the victory as he was going to occupy the whole territory, to capture Kyiv, etc. But at least to achieve that goals, which I mentioned, to occupy completely Donetsk and Lugansk regions on the 9th of May. It's a victory day. You know, Putin regime is based on the celebration of this victory, resentment of the Second World War, and his regime is built on it. So, of course, he wants to finish so-called operation war by that time. And of course, he wants and set the goal to achieve this before the 9th of May, to give a parade, as I mentioned, not only in Moscow, but in Donetsk and Mariupol. So if they see they are failing, they may use chemical and even nuclear weapons. And of course, it can change. It's the only way they can win, because as I mentioned, that territories and our positions are extremely fortified. During we were doing it during last 8 years, and you know, when you attack, you need just to have much more people, 3 to 1, and of course they don't have it. So the only way to achieve their goal is, as I mentioned, rocket attacks, chemical attacks, and even nuclear one.
Yeah, thanks for that analysis. Quite a potentially dire situation on the horizon. And I wanted to ask you on a little bit more personal note. As we all know, there was quite a lot of travel back and forth between Russia and Ukraine before the 24th of February 2022, despite tense relations. And I believe that you yourself have been to Russia a number of times, and I'm sure have interacted and spoken with Russian people. And I was wondering, in that light, were you surprised when Russia invaded Ukraine, the full invasion on the 24th of February this year?
Well, firstly, I not only visited Russia, I was just visiting Russian TV. Yes, I was defending a Ukrainian position, so-called counter-propaganda, for several years, and I've been there for hundreds of times. I know that propaganda is the most popular talk shows, etc. And I know personally them, and I know personally that propagandists, all of them the most famous. I know politicians, the members of parliament, etc., etc. I have talked to them for many times, off records, etc. So yes, I was surprised. I was sure that Putin will not make such a decision for a full-fledged invasion, because, well, you know, I thought he was smarter, actually, because from military point of view, it was just well, I can't find appropriate word. I mean, it was insane, and we can see already the results. Thousands, almost 20,000 of Russian soldiers are already killed. So they fled from Kyiv, from the north of Ukraine. So I thought, and especially after the 22nd of February, when Putin just organized that Security Council and made a decision about how to say, I forgot the appropriate word. So just to have relations officially, official relations with DNR, so-called, and LNR, that occupied territories, pseudo republics. I thought, okay, that would be it. Okay, I could expect that there would be fights in Donbass, because then he declared the next day that they are going just, they consider that all territories of Donetsk and Lugansk regions should be occupied. So I could predict, at least I thought, okay, there would be fights, there would be, of course, a serious situation in Donbass, but not a full-fledged invasion. Nobody could. As you know, as one Russian political expert mentioned, I remember I liked her phrase. She said, no one could believe, only American intelligence was right, and the maddest people, the maddest. So nobody, so those people who were considering and thinking that Putin is a smart, and I thought as well, so he had a strategy, he was thinking all the risks, that he knew the real situation, that their troops would not be welcome here, that Ukrainian army is much stronger than in 2014, all that real aspects which should be taken into consideration before making such decisions was failed. So it was a shock, absolute shock. I remember when I was woken up early in the morning by my friend, and he called me Maxim, there are explosions, and I was sleeping, I thought, well, okay, I knew that I should evacuate my mother from Mariupol, and that Mariupol can be at risk somehow, but anyway, not on such scale. So it was a shock for all the experts, and not only in Ukraine, as well in Russia and all around the world. Only intelligence, as I mentioned, American was right, British intelligence was right, but those who didn't have the whole information couldn't imagine. But because, as I mentioned, from logical point of view, it was a complete insane, and we already proved it. And you know, there are already decisions taken, arrests in Russia of FSB generals, of his advisors, who were convincing him that everything would be like in Crimea in 2014, that Ukrainian people are loving, adoring Putin, that they will be welcoming Russian occupiers with bread and salt, and as it traditionally happens, etc., etc.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And finally, I wanted to ask you, I mean, you're a professor of international relations in Kyiv, and as I understand it, incredibly, you've gone back to pretty much normal teaching in the last week or so. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about that. What are classes like now? What's changed? And how are your students managing under these essentially wartime conditions?
Well, you know, the point is that I had only one lecture and seminar. Last week we restarted the educational process. Before that, I had lecture just on the 24th of February. And that time, on my pre-last lecture, I was given instructions to my students, because it was already war. War started just a few hours before. what to do, just in informational sphere. So my lecture was about informational warfares, what they will face, etc., etc. The point is that because of coronavirus, we had again just online lectures since last autumn, since November, I guess. So my students are spread all around Ukraine. Also, they were also in occupied territories, even now in Melitopol, for example, it is occupied already. So there are a lot of them left. Luckily, everybody is alive. I was asking them, of course, first questions, everybody is safe, and it's the most important. But when I saw that, usually I have about 70 people, 70 students on my lecture. But then I saw they were about 50, and usually we control, you know, how students visit lectures. I said, why only 50? Where are the rest? Just give me the list who are absent. And then they said, well, there is such a problem because still, as I mentioned, they are all around Ukraine, still air raid sirens, and they go to the shelters. Some of them have to go to the shelters. That's why they're absent. But some girls I saw was in Chernigiv. It is also totally ruined. I think it's after Mariupol, second city which suffered the most. They have no electricity, no gas now. Oh, she told me she has a gas. I said, okay, at least you can cook food, but no electricity, no water supply, nothing. So, but somehow they managed to be present, and you know, for them after 40 days break, they're happy to be back. At least, you know, just not to think about war. The situation somehow became better, at least, as I mentioned, all around Ukraine except Donbass. So somehow, step by step, we're coming back tomorrow. I'm having again 3 lectures and seminars. So I'm also glad because, you know, you're just constantly only reading news, analyzing, giving analysis, giving interviews inside Ukraine, outside Ukraine. So, of course, for me, it's also a pleasure to come back. I can't say to normal life, but somehow it's a normal life.
Yeah, some kind of normal. Well, thanks, Maxim. I really appreciate your analysis, and I wish all the best to you and your students. And stay safe, and I look forward to another update in future.
You're welcome.